We will now enter an area into the academic writing exploration, wherein we are no longer merely looking at definitions or perhaps speculating on the theoretical position. You will be taught in this lesson how to write the first segment of your research paper, which is, in the parlance of academic writing, known as abstracts. So, we are entering the lesson called Writing Abstracts, detailing academic writing. What is an abstract in academic writing? You will see that just like in a very dark room where you have entered but cannot see anything, suddenly a light goes on and you immediately can have your bearings. An abstract in academic writing is nothing much different. The Writing Center, University of Madison, notes the following: abstract in academic writing denotes short summary of your research paper, approximately 6 to 7 sentences and with a word content of 150 to 250. There may be, for students, a little catch in the term summary. All of you who have gone through a long period of schooling, then a period of intermediate learning, and only then, as a third step, you have come to college level education. You are very well aware of the term summary. In school or in intermediate language classes, summary denotes writing a long piece in a short manner. In fact, there are many categories of making a long piece shorter. If summary is one sort, then the other kind is a précis, which is actually 1/3 of the entire piece. Now, when they say an abstract is a summary, it is not unusual for new students to this aspect to think that he or she will adopt the same methodology that he or she did while writing a summary in school or intermediate learning. But although the definition uses the word summary, it is a very distinctive kind of summary, which is the abstract, a distinctive kind of summary. When we say a distinctive kind of summary, we imply that it takes all the characteristics of the summary that you do know of, but it also adds to something. what else does it add? It's not just making a long passage short. And therefore, we now look into our next area. Why should you write an abstract? In academic writing, research findings need to be published on domain platforms to merit validation and recognition. Let us go a little slow here. Academic writing is not a pastime. Academic writing is not, unlike creative writing, a burst of passion. Academic writing has a definite purpose: to further research. It is not an exaggeration to suggest that without research in various fields, civilization would not have attained the momentum that it has attained and is going on attaining. Whenever an astrophysicist discovers in the galaxy something unknown, he just doesn't relax and sit back and enjoy his own finding. When an oceanographer, delving into the depths of the ocean, finds something in sea life not seen before, or maybe goes deeper as a geologist and explores the Earth's crust for unknown knowledge heretofore, they neither of these just sit back and enjoy their own findings in a private room of their own. They actually document those findings, build up a very factual research paper, and publish the same. Unless and until they publish, adopting the correct tone and reach out to the reader audience, there can be no furthering of the research. So publication is imperative to academic writing. There are many separate domains. Obviously, science findings in scientific journals, humanities finding in likewise journals, social science findings in the domain of social science. But in order to be published, a distinctive kind of summary has to be written first and sent to the platforms, the journals, the societies for validation, for evaluation, underlining the intention of that particular research area. That distinctive summary is the abstract. So, if the abstract is not written, not merely a hodgepodge of the findings, but a precise documentation and intention of the researcher, 5 to 7 sentences, maybe a little plus or a little minus, 150 to 250 words, maybe a little plus minus, and sent to the domains, there can be no scope for furthering research. Organizing publishing authorities evaluate the research intent and quality as presented in the abstract. Therefore, the abstract can be said to be a kind of a passport and entrance into the main research area. surely you can value the importance of the abstract. Now we explore the abstract. Make a note of these words. Not that the story need be long, but it will take a long while to make it short. There's the catch here. Not that the story need be long, but it will take a long while to make it short. Long while to make it short. Here is almost an opposition in the sentence. But it is not an opposition. If you look carefully, that the entire domain of research has to become concentrated and yet completely lucid in the form of an abstract. So, indeed, it takes a long time to make it short. In itself, the abstract is brief, but it takes a lot of thought process, lot of control, lot of unbiased perception to make that long research documented findings into a short, precise summary that has to be sent to the platforms to be evaluated. Looking a little more in detail, an abstract ought to be intelligible on its own. As it stands, that brief but very thoughtful, very carefully worded summary must be clear on its own without the reading party having access to the paper. The paper will come later only if permission is given on the basis of the abstract. So the abstract must talk, quote unquote, like we read in the lesson of tone, that it has to speak to the reader. The abstract must speak clearly to the reader, having all the points of the research area completely clarified and raising the interest, not telling everything but telling enough. And that, unless it is achieved within the brief permitted space, the main research may never see the light of the day. It should outline the scope of the research in such a way that a blueprint of the paper becomes evident to the reader. Blueprint. I hope you understand the term blueprint. Before an architectural splendor, a monument, a building, whatever, comes actually to be shaped out of material, there has to be a basic prototype or design precisely noting how that splendor will ultimately come out of the material. That is the blueprint. The blueprint, therefore, is the basis of the design, and so is the abstract, the basis of the research paper. An abstract is a statement of facts in relation to the research area. As a rule, an abstract is characterized by brevity. Yes, if we go back, not that the story need be long, but it will take a long while to make it short. Brevity. Brevity does not mean that you leave out everything. No. You apply complete, careful thinking, and whatever may be the basic emphasis of your research, all of that has to come in without spilling over the limit of certain sentences and certain word content. 5, 7, a little plus minus, and 150, 250, little plus minus, but it must not spill over that. So a lot of care, a lot of precision, a lot of control, and you have the entire research in a kind of a capsule or a blueprint. There must be in the brief presentation consistency, and therefore there will not be references there. However, in humanities and social sciences, textual quotes are permitted only up to a limitation if it makes the area of research clear enough. We now look into detail what I have referred to as anatomy of an abstract. The word anatomy, borrowed from the jargon of medicine, must be quite clear to you and familiar that when you dissect, let's say, a specimen in a laboratory experiment, which I think most of you have done in your schooling, where you study all the subjects before specialization, there a specimen would be pinned on a tray and you would be studying its inner parts, labeling by dissecting and open the specimen, which of course must have been already dead and soaked in formalin or something like that. That is called an anatomy, a detailed studying of the characteristics. So here we have the anatomy of an abstract. A, emphasizing the importance of the topic, underlining the necessity of argument. So the abstract must underline the area and of course also prove why this area needs to be looked into. Research gap in the area has to be pointed out. Very, very important. Why is it that your research should be of any interest or meaningful value to your readers? Because, and you have to study and be completely prepared to mention in the abstract that your particular area in that subject was not adequately touched before, although other researches had taken place. Research gap in the area pointed out. Comparative stated. You have to compare other research work in the subject but not similar to your area, because unless that comparison is made, you cannot prove to your reader that your area is worth pursuing. The abstract must contain this element. Methodology as far as science is concerned, perspective or intent as far as humanities is concerned. Science abstracts must contain the method that you are going to adopt in establishing that area which had not been studied in detail before. The methodology must be clearly enunciated, because that is also to be judged by your readers. So the abstract must have that little space for methodology. But when it comes to humanities, the way of studying humanities is, of course, as you will all appreciate, very different from science. So, research work in humanities should not be looking at methodologies or instruments or tools as such. It takes place in a different way. How do you adopt the point of view that you are adopting? And you have to prove with comparison that such a point of view on that particular subject was not adopted before. So, Indeed, in a way, it's a methodology, but it is not methodology as in a laboratory experiment when you have to come to science research. But the abstract must contain these elements. Key findings. What do you hope to establish? This added to the research gaps that you must have pointed out, they complete the anatomy of the abstract. And of course, what is the actual aim that the findings will lead to is of course a part of the anatomy. Emphasizing importance of the topic and necessity of argument, research gap to be pointed out in the particular domain, comparatives to be stated, methodology as far as science has to be stated, and perspective to be adopted in humanities to be stated, key findings, why should you at all be writing this particular abstract and attempting the research, and what do you hope to gain for it. That must come within the scope of that brief, concise, distinctive summary that we called abstract in academic writing. In a model abstract, the first sentence usually introduces the topic under study. You will find an example. This sentence, that is to say, the introductory sentence, also implies the question underlining the research study. What are the various causes and interrelationships among them? Thereafter, you come to the next part of the abstract. The next sentences, maybe 2, maybe 3, explain what previous research has demonstrated. Because it is with previous research that the present research is going to be compared and contrasted by those people who will judge your abstract and then give you permission or may not give you permission to continue the research, and therefore you will have to give the comparisons in the second part of the abstract. Thereafter, the data, the research and analytical methods, as I told you, whether it is science or whether it is humanities, yes, indeed, the approaches will be different, but in the abstract, you have to mention the approaches. You have to be very clear. In what way are you going to pursue the research? What are the instruments? What are the processes that you will undertake, maybe in the field study or in the laboratory? And when it comes to humanities and social sciences, you will tell what is the perspective, why that perspective has been chosen. These are very important commitments that you are making in the scope of the abstract, because these commitments will convince, hopefully, the readers, the ones who will publish or will not publish your research work. The major findings will form the next and the concluding part of the abstract, from where the implications and significance of the study. After all, you have to convince the readers why this study is important, why this research is important. You will have to establish, of course, if it is an honest research, this will be definitely established that you have pursued this project because these findings that have come from the project must lead to these important aspects which will take some area of civilization forward. The typical kind of information that you can find in abstract, the context or background information for your research, the general topic under study, the specific topic of your research. The central questions or statement of the problem your research addresses. Central question, that part is very important because it is at once your aim and your scope and your justification. What's already known about this area, and of course that establishes the research gap, the main reasons for your research and your goals for that research, the methods we have already talked about them, then findings, results and arguments. This particular manual is taken from the Manual of the American Psychological Association, and it is very, very informative as well as a accepted standard. If we look now at the series of questions that may be addressed to a person preparing to write an abstract, they may be of this kind. An abstract is the A. Side door to the paper, threshold to the paper, appendix to the paper, conclusion to the paper. What do you think the correct option is going to be? An abstract is the threshold to the paper, the very entrance. Unless and until you have mastered the writing of the abstract, gone into each anatomical detail of the abstract, you cannot enter the area where permission will be given and you can further your research. An abstract must indicate, and again we have options: research history, research gaps and methodology, biography of researchers, summary of research. Again, what do you think? What must an abstract indicate? Is it biography of researchers, or is it going to be a summary of the research? No. Research gaps and methodology. Research gaps and methodology. Then abstract involves a long way to make it decorous, flourishing, attractive, or is it short? Short. Because once you understand the anatomy of the abstract, you have to understand that the brief, blueprint-like quality is what the abstract is all about. If you are quite clear on the entirety of your research, only then and only then can you write an abstract. If you think you can begin with an abstract and then go into the research, then you are not right. It is your research which must be honestly undertaken, completed, a paper on it to be written as an academic writing example, adopting the correct tone. It is from there that the abstract will arise. Because until and unless you have entered the zone of research, you cannot shape the entrance of the research. The entrance of the research must give the light into the dark area, the dark area being the research area as to your readers, and the light will be your abstract, which will tell your readers what the subject is wanting to be shown and what the subject has shown already and what your abstract is going to make out of the research gaps and address the gaps so that the entire new dimension of an area can emerge out of it and one can enter into an unknown horizon, an unknown area with a great deal of knowledge which was not there before. Unless and until you shape an abstract properly, you cannot make your research known. You may have conducted that research, but you cannot make your research known. And this abstract has to be sent to the domain platforms, and in those domain platforms, the abstract must talk itself. It will have all the material that the readers wish to explore, and in that material will be the intention, scope, and implication of your research. Thank you. I hope this lesson makes it easy for you to write an abstract in academic writing.